Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're tackling enterprise security, but we're not going to just throw a bunch of jargon at you. Instead, we're going to build a fortress, a digital one. Yeah, we're breaking down this whole complicated world of cyber defense using an analogy that everyone gets, the good old castle.
But let's start with a big question to really frame this thing. How in the world do you defend a 1,000-mile border? Because, let's be honest, that's what protecting a modern company's network feels like. The sheer scale is just huge. The attack surface is massive, threats are coming from everywhere all the time. So yeah, where do you even start?
Well, you start with a solid plan, right? So here's our game plan for this explainer. First, we're going to build our digital walls. Then, we'll post guards at the gates. We'll also talk about what to do when, and I mean when, not if, an attack gets through. And finally, we'll cover the constant upkeep you need to keep that fortress from crumbling. All right, let's get right into it. Part 1, building your digital walls. This is all about the blueprint, the foundation, the proactive stuff you do before the bad guys even show up. Okay, so the very first rule of building a strong fortress is something called segmentation. Look, you wouldn't just build one giant wall around a huge open courtyard, right? No way. You'd build smaller, walled-off sections inside the main castle. That way, if an attacker gets over that first wall, they don't get the keys to the whole kingdom. Nope, they're trapped in one tiny area, contained. And here, you can see exactly what I'm talking about. On one side, you have a totally flat network. One little breach, and boom, it can spread like wildfire, just everywhere. But on the other side, with segmentation, that fire is stuck in a single room. It is an absolute game changer when you're trying to respond to an incident. All right, next up, you've got to control who gets the keys. This is a huge concept called the principle of least privilege. And it's simple, really. You just don't give everyone the master key to every room in the castle. Think about it. A nurse at a hospital, she needs access to patient records, for sure. But does she need to get into the hospital's financial servers? Absolutely not. You only give people the keys to the specific doors they have to open to do their job, nothing more. And finally, for this section, you have to actually harden the walls. Now, this stuff might sound like Security 101, but you would be shocked at how often it gets missed. Changing default passwords, that's just like changing the generic lock that came with your front door. Removing extra software you don't need, that's like sealing up old forgotten secret passages. And disabling unused ports, it's basically bricking up any windows you're not using. Super simple stuff, but absolutely non-negotiable. Okay, so our walls are up, they're hardened, but a fortress is more than just a pile of stones, right? It's about the people, the guards, who are actively patrolling those walls. And that brings us perfectly to our next section, the daily watch. This is where we talk about access control. And the easiest way to think about this is with something called an access control list, or ACL. Just picture your main guard at the front gate. That guard has a list, a very, very specific list. It says who gets in, where they're allowed to go, and who gets told, nope, sorry, not today. It is your first line of active defense. Let's take a finance department, for example. The ACL for their servers is basically a digital bouncer. It's checking IDs at the door. The list says, are you coming from a finance computer? Cool, you're in. Oh, you're from HR trying to get to the payroll server? Sorry, you're not on the list. It's that level of detail, that granularity, that lets everyone do their jobs without getting in each other's ways securely. And what's really kind of cool here is seeing how different systems handle this. You look at Windows, and it's this super complex hierarchical system with things called SIDs and inheritance. It's a lot. Then you look at Linux, and it's got that classic, almost elegant model. You've got permissions for the owner, the group, and then everyone else. They're two totally different ways of thinking, but they're both trying to get to that same end goal, controlling who gets to do what. Here's another really powerful tool for your guards, an application allow list. Let's go back to our castle. This is like having a list of pre-approved merchants. You know, the blacksmith, the baker, they're on the list, they can come in and set up shop. But if some random unknown vendor rolls up to the gate with a cart full of who knows what, the guards just say, nope, you're not on the list. It's a deny by default mindset, and man, is it effective. But I gotta be honest, this isn't a walk in the park to set up. It's a really detailed process. You have to figure out every single legitimate app your company uses, build that master list, and then manage it from one central place. And the real trick is keeping that list current without stopping people from actually doing their jobs. It's tough, but if you can pull it off, wow, what a powerful defense. And of course, what's a fortress without sentinels up in the watchtowers? That's your monitoring. It's having eyes on everything all the time across the entire kingdom. Your systems need to be constantly on the lookout for anything that looks weird, like 1,000 failed login attempts from some IP address you've never seen before. That's when the alarm bells should start ringing loud and clear. So, the walls are up, the guards are at their posts, but let's face it, attackers are clever, and one of them has slipped past your defenses. It happens. So, what do you do now? This is where we get into damage control. Your absolute first move is isolation. Think of this as the emergency lockdown protocol. Slam. You drop the portcullis, you seal off that entire section of the fortress where the intruder is. The goal is to stop the threat, right then and there, from spreading anywhere else. It has to be fast, and it has to be decisive.
But hold on. Before you go scorched earth and just wipe that machine clean, you have to stop and ask some critical questions. First up, is there anything on this device that's irreplaceable? We talking critical data? Or maybe evidence that the forensics team is going to need to build a case? You gotta know.
Question number 2, can you even trust the machine itself anymore? Because look, just reinstalling the operating system is totally useless if the malware has dug its way down into the hardware's firmware. If that's the case, that machine, it's a write-off. You can't trust it. And finally, question 3, can you afford to wait? This is the tough part. It's always this battle between moving lightning fast to stop the attack from spreading and moving slowly and carefully to make sure you don't destroy any evidence. And let me tell you, you better have a company policy that answers this before you're the one in the hot seat making that call.
Phew, okay, so just because you built a fortress and fought off one attack, that doesn't mean the story's over. Not even close. A truly strong defense needs constant work. Constant repairs, constant upkeep. You always have to be ready for the next thing.
And that brings us to the never-ending job of patching. It is quite literally a race against the clock. So imagine a scout discovers a brand new crack in one of your castle walls. That's a vulnerability. Patching is the act of rushing your masons out there to fix that crack before an enemy army finds it and pours through. But here's the thing about patching. It's not just a tech problem. It's a business problem. Every single industry has its own unique headaches. You're in healthcare, rebooting a critical system could literally impact patient care. You're in finance, you have incredibly strict windows where you're even allowed to make changes. And in manufacturing, taking a production line down for even an hour can cost millions. The point is, your patching solution has to fit the reality of your business. And really, that brings us to the single most important idea of this whole explainer. You can't just go out and buy a shiny new firewall, plug it in, and say, okay, we're secure now. It just doesn't work that way. Great security is not a product you can buy off a shelf. It's a process. It's this living, breathing thing that involves constant building, guarding, responding, and maintaining. So, I'll leave you with one final question to think about. We've just walked through the entire blueprint of a digital fortress, right? From the deep foundations and the high walls to the guards at the gates and the crews doing repairs. So now you have to ask yourself, what's the weakest wall in your fortress?